Well, earlier today, this morning, in fact, I dropped a video about Unrivaled ratings being straight trash. I mean, complete dog shiznit, right? And they are. They've fallen off a cliff. Now, something I did not mention, the ratings have went down versus last year, despite there being a new television rating system that has, as we've seen, artificially inflated numbers.
At this point, we're investigating a mystery so shocking that even my analytics needed therapy. Unraveled has crashed, the ratings are flatter than yesterday's soda, and rumor says nobody is watching. But how did a show go from buzzworthy to ghost town? Was it the content, the timing, or a curse from the algorithm gods? Stick around, because this spiral is wild, hilarious, and painfully educational. Trust me, you'll laugh, gasp, and rethink how quickly internet fame evaporates overnight.
What an absolute disaster these Unrivaled ratings have been so far this season. Week 1, depressing. Week 2 doesn't look any more promising than week 1. The Friday numbers are in, and they are sad. They are bad. They are dreadful. If I'm TNT, Warner Bros., they gotta feel had at this point. Nafisa Collier, Brianna Stewart, the hubby.
The internet loves a good rise, but it secretly lives for an even better fall. And this particular fall has been so quiet that even gravity seems confused. Unraveled did not so much collapse as it gently slid off the algorithmic couch, knocked over a glass of lukewarm relevance, and then pretended nothing happened while everyone else slowly left the room.
They average 175k airing on 2 channels. Airing on 2 channels at the same time. That's not good. The 2 truTV exclusive games on January 5th averaged 32,000 viewers. 32,000 viewers. 32,000. And by the way, on live streams, there was 500 viewers watching these games.
At some point, the numbers stopped moving, the buzz stopped buzzing, and the ratings settled into a peaceful state of near invisibility that would make a ghost feel self-conscious. Back then, Unraveled carried itself like the intellectual cool kid of the content world, confidently suggesting that it was about to peel back layers of truth, shock, and discovery that nobody else dared to touch.
You got Brianna Stewart coming out having to talk about the ratings and the fact that, it's pretty clear they think the television ratings is how this league is going to survive. Who could have seen that 3-on-3 basketball was not a good idea? Anyway, now we're finding out through a front office sports article. I'm actually shocked, to be honest, that this was written as pro player.
The promise felt bold, the branding felt serious, and the tone implied that viewers were about to become smarter simply by watching. Unfortunately, confidence without follow-through is just a motivational poster taped to a wall nobody visits anymore, and that wall is now located deep in the forgotten corners of the platform.
Looking like ass. You gotta check this out. TNT Sports Chairman and CEO Luis Silberwasser may be looking to get out of the Unrivaled business. The chairman and CEO may want out as soon as possible after just shelving up $30 million to have them join it. This is crazy. Unrivaled is crumbling right before our eyes, you guys. Welcome to Keep the Vision. Make sure you like.
The decline did not arrive with fireworks or scandal, which somehow makes it funnier because the ratings did not crash like a dramatic stock market plunge, but rather melted away like ice left out during a long, boring meeting. Every new episode quietly entered the world, looked around for applause, and found nothing but silence and a suspiciously loud echo. At a certain point, even the algorithms stopped pretending to care, which is the digital equivalent of being left on read by someone who has already unfollowed you. The most impressive part of this whole situation is how thoroughly unnoticed the crash has been, because internet failures usually come with memes, reaction videos, and at least one overly serious thread explaining why this moment represents a larger cultural shift. In this case, There was no uproar, no outrage, and no dramatic farewell tour because nobody realized there was anything to react to in the first place. It is hard to spark discourse when the audience has already wandered off to watch something else that feels more alive. There is a strange irony in a project called Unraveled slowly becoming the most tightly wound mystery of all, because no one seems particularly interested in unraveling why it stopped working. The content continued, the uploads remained consistent, and the tone stayed determinedly important, yet the connection with viewers quietly evaporated.
Here that I want to point out because it piqued my interest, man. Now, she was basically saying the sparkle has worn off on this league. People are not watching. People are not showing up. The numbers aren't looking as good as the first year. All right, so that's basically what she's getting at right here. She stated that inside the renovated arena, which added roughly 150 seats, bringing the capacity from 850 to 1,000 fans, seats were empty. Now, I didn't expect it.
It turns out that consistency without evolution is just repetition wearing a confident smile. At some point, the show began to feel less like a compelling exploration and more like homework that nobody assigned, but everyone felt vaguely guilty about ignoring. The pacing dragged, the stakes felt imaginary, and the topics carried the emotional weight of a Wikipedia article read aloud by someone who insists this is fascinating if you just give it another 20 minutes. Viewers did not hate it, which would have been useful because hate still counts as engagement, but instead they simply stopped showing up. The algorithm, that famously patient and forgiving entity, gave Unraveled plenty of chances to redeem itself, but enthusiasm cannot be forced by metadata alone. Thumbnails tried harder, titles grew more dramatic, and descriptions whispered promises of shocking revelations that never quite landed. Eventually, the platform seemed to shrug and redirect its attention to creators who understood that attention spans are fragile creatures that require constant feeding. One of the quiet tragedies here is that Unraveled never became bad enough to be fun, which is a crucial step many successful disasters manage to achieve. There were no jaw-dropping missteps, no unintentionally hilarious moments, and no quotes destined to live forever in ironic compilations.
Of the tickets, people are either actively trying to resell or haven't been sold. That's not ideal. That's not ideal at all. And most concerningly, with second-year ratings on TNT were lackluster. Unrivaled's opening slate on January the 5th, which kicked off with a Monday afternoon game, averaged 175k viewers in the first two games to air on both TNT and True TV. So basically, they averaged 175k airing on two channels. Airing on two channels at the same time. That's not good. The two True TV exclusive games on January 5th averaged 32,000 viewers. 32,000 viewers. 32,000. And by the way, on live streams, there was 500 viewers watching these games. 500. They averaged 32,000. Like, that's bad. That's real bad. Like, the True TV games last year, the lowest they were at was like 90, 100k. It was seen as a big shock when the True TV games didn't get 100k. It says here, the games on January 9th averaged 139,000 across TNT and True TV. So obviously they were being aired on both, averaging 139,000.
Instead, there was a slow drift into mediocrity, which is arguably worse, because mediocrity does not trend, does not inspire reaction content, and does not even earn the courtesy of a collective eye roll. As the ratings continued their downward meditation into irrelevance, the gap between ambition and execution grew wider, creating a sense that the show desperately wanted to matter more than it actually did. The seriousness began to feel performative, as though gravity itself had been applied by committee rather than earned through substance. When everything is treated like a revelation, nothing actually feels revealing. There is also the small matter of timing, which Unraveled seemed to treat as a polite suggestion rather than an unavoidable reality. In an era where audiences are flooded with content that is faster, sharper, and often far more self-aware, lengthy explorations that move at the pace of a cautious academic stroll feel increasingly out of place. Viewers are not necessarily less intelligent or curious, but they are significantly less patient with content that does not respect their time. The internet has developed a taste for creators who understand the unspoken contract of engagement, which promises value, entertainment, or insight in exchange for attention, and Unrivaled began to violate that contract by demanding investment without providing sufficient payoff.
This was a Emmy-winning show. Just going back to this, Inside the NBA wins 3 sports Emmys. TNT's Inside the NBA won 3 sports Emmys on Tuesday night, just as the league appears ready to part ways with Warner Bros. Discovery in the studio show's 35-year run. While media rights negotiations continued earlier in the day on Fifth Avenue, just 2 miles away from the Emmy ceremony at the Lincoln Center, the playoff version of Inside the NBA won the category Outstanding Studio Show. Limited run, while Charles Barkley took Outstanding Analyst and Ernie Johnson won Outstanding Host. Now, the point in showing you that is, this was a #1 rated show. Ratings through the roof. Emmy Award winning show. They won 3 Emmys in 1 year, and that's not the only year they won Emmys. They was winning Emmys every damn year, basically. Okay? This was a spectacular.
Each episode felt like it was building towards something that never quite arrived, leaving viewers with the distinct sensation of having waited for a bus that was quietly canceled without notice. As interest declined, the silence around the show grew louder, creating a feedback loop where low engagement led to less visibility, which led to even lower engagement. This is the content equivalent of a restaurant that insists it is still open while all the lights are off and the chairs are stacked upside down. Technically, nothing has ended, but the atmosphere strongly suggests otherwise. There is also the issue of tone, which remained stubbornly self-important even as the audience drifted away. Instead of adapting, acknowledging the shift, or injecting a bit of self-awareness, the show doubled down on its original posture, as though seriousness alone could reverse gravity. This refusal to evolve created a disconnect that made the content feel frozen in time, like a relic from an era when audiences had fewer options and lower expectations. The funniest part of this entire situation is that the crash happened so slowly that it almost feels intentional, as though Unrivaled decided to experiment on how quietly a project could disappear without triggering any alarms. There were no farewell speeches, no emotional posts, and no dramatic pivot to a new format, just a steady continuation that nobody seemed to notice. It is a masterclass in how to fade out without even the courtesy of a montage.
Every game last year, they had 850 seats. You couldn't fill that up. What makes you think you can fill up 1,000 seats, right? Now, maybe they had the idea of, hey, we got Paige Beckers, we got Malongo, Citron. We have these new legs. We have a lot more stars in the league. Maybe that will increase our fan base. Not mad at the idea, but I can see how this could be a little concerning for some people.
From the outside, it looks like a case study in what happens when creators mistake initial interest for guaranteed loyalty. Early success can create the illusion that an audience will follow anywhere, forgive anything, and wait indefinitely. But the internet has never been that patient or that sentimental. Attention is rented, not owned, and Unrivaled forgot to renew the lease. As the numbers continued to dwindle, the gap between perception and reality became almost poetic, because the show still carried itself like something culturally significant while being watched by fewer people than a casual reaction clip. This dissonance gave the whole project an accidental layer of comedy, as though it were delivering a keynote speech to an empty auditorium with complete confidence that the crowd was simply running late. At this stage, the ratings are not just low, but philosophically low, existing in a state where statistics feel abstract rather than alarming. When view counts reach a certain point, they stop looking like data and start looking like a quiet personal secret that everyone politely avoids mentioning. It becomes less about recovery and more about acceptance. The internet, of course, has moved on because it always does, chasing the next thing that feels fresh, unpredictable, or at least aware of its own absurdity. Unrivaled, meanwhile, continues to exist in a parallel timeline where relevance is assumed and engagement is expected to return out of sheer respect for effort.
Players don't want to go through the struggle. They want everything to be given. They believe they're entitled to millions of dollars because they pretend to play basketball. But the thing they don't realize, no one respects entitlement. People don't respect handouts. And Unrivaled is finding out the hard way. When you're not respected, when you haven't earned what you're demanding, the end result is usually huge embarrassing failure.
Unfortunately, the algorithm does not reward effort, and viewers do not reward obligation. What makes this collapse especially fascinating is how preventable it feels in hindsight, because the warning signs were visible long before the ratings flatlined. Engagement slowed, comments thinned, and the energy shifted from curiosity to obligation, yet the content remained unchanged. It is the classic mistake of treating a creative project like a finished product rather than a living conversation. The result is a channel that now feels less like a destination and more like an artifact, something people vaguely remember subscribing to before forgetting why. The absence of conversation around it is not cruel, but it is telling, because the internet is rarely silent unless it has already emotionally moved on. Indifference, after all, is the most honest metric of all. Unrivaled did not fail because it lacked intelligence, resources, or effort, but because it lost its sense of connection with the audience it was supposed to engage. Content that forgets to entertain while trying to inform often ends up doing neither particularly well. Without humor, surprise, or emotional resonance, even the most carefully researched material can feel like background noise.
I've not heard Unrivaled was in a heap of trouble, man. These ratings has fallen low to about 30,000 viewers per game, and basically what people saying, it could only get worse from here. Now TNT been sending subliminals to Unrivaled regarding their $100 million deal, so they got a 6-year $100 million deal. Now what's crazy about all of this is that I forgot that this Unrivaled deal was 6 years, $100 million. Now it gotta be some type of clause.
Now the show exists in a strange limbo, technically alive but culturally absent, uploading into a void that does not echo back. It is the digital equivalent of waving enthusiastically at someone who has already crossed the street. The effort is visible, but the moment has passed. There is something almost admirable about the commitment to continue despite the numbers, although admiration does not translate into views. Persistence without adaptation is simply stubbornness dressed in optimism, and optimism does not trend. At some point, the content stops being a conversation and becomes a monologue delivered to an empty room. The lesson here is not that Unrivaled deserved to fail, but that the internet does not reward seriousness alone, nor does it forgive stagnation. Audiences crave energy, self-awareness, and evolution, and when those elements disappear, so does attention. The crash was not dramatic, but it was thorough. In the end, Unrivaled serves as a cautionary tale wrapped in irony, proving that even projects built on the promise of discovery can become lost if they stop listening. The ratings did not just drop, they quietly slipped away, taking relevance with them. And somewhere in the vast digital landscape, a once confident show continues uploading, convinced that the unraveling is still coming, while the internet has already changed the channel.
Non-existent. January 5th, Unrivaled had 2 games on something called True TV. True TV? Why is a channel named True TV, which I would assume is dedicated to the truth, why are they broadcasting a league that is make-believe? Why is True TV broadcast?
That confidence, oddly enough, may be the most fascinating relic left behind, because it persists long after the audience has clocked out. There is something surreal about watching a project maintain the posture of importance while existing in near-total obscurity, as though relevance were a moral certainty rather than a measurable outcome. The tone never wavers, the presentation never softens, and the assumption remains that attention will eventually return out of respect for the effort involved, which is not how attention has ever worked online. What makes the situation quietly absurd is how the structure still feels designed for an audience that no longer exists. The pacing assumes patience, the explanations assume devotion, and the delivery assumes a level of trust that must be earned repeatedly rather than assumed indefinitely. It is content frozen in the mindset of its earliest success, unable or unwilling to acknowledge that the environment has shifted and the viewers have evolved alongside it. Meanwhile, the platform continues doing what it always does, rewarding adaptability, experimentation, and creators who understand that relevance is temporary by default. Unrivaled, in contrast, feels like it is waiting for a cultural correction that will suddenly restore its former position, as though the internet occasionally pauses, reflects, and apologizes for moving on too quickly. That moment, unsurprisingly, has not arrived. There is also a peculiar lack of self-awareness that turns the entire situation into unintentional satire.
Sleep over. Now, Front Office Sports revealed ratings down big for year one. League president Alex Bezos. Leagues aren't built overnight. So that was his statement to the concern about the ratings, talking about leagues wasn't built overnight. What do you mean, bro? You got a 6-year deal. This is something that has never been done before. You know what I'm saying? And for him to just try to downplay it like this.
When a project refuses to acknowledge its own decline, it creates a gap between reality and presentation that audiences instinctively notice. Viewers do not need numbers to sense when something is no longer alive in the cultural conversation, and pretending otherwise only amplifies the disconnect. The ideas still arrive dressed in seriousness, the delivery still insists on significance, and the execution still behaves as though attention is guaranteed. What is missing is the spark that once justified that confidence, the sense that watching would lead somewhere unexpected or rewarding. The irony is that a shift in tone, format, or perspective could have transformed the decline into a reinvention. But reinvention requires humility. It requires admitting that what once worked no longer does, and that audiences are not obligated to stay simply because something exists. Without that acknowledgement, the content becomes static, and static content is invisible content. So Unrivaled continues its quiet routine, releasing episodes into an algorithm that has already made up its mind. Each upload lands softly, makes no sound, and disappears into the feed like a leaf falling into deep water. The unraveling, it turns out, was never about the subject matter at all, but about the slow unspooling of relevance itself, a process so gentle and thorough that by the time anyone noticed, there was no audience left to notice with.